you know. But how is it that these things are able to maintain their height? And he came up with a rudimentary idea that if some kind of action displaces the weight of the thing in motion, it will support it. And this became the underpinning for not only aviation, but also navigation. How it is you can build an iron-hulled ship, the thing would float as if the weight of the water it displaces is greater than the weight of the iron. But he didn't know all that yet. All he knew was that thing's flying and I want to know how. And he ran home and he drew pictures. Now let's pause there a moment, because how often do we run home and draw pictures and a little voice in our head says, now how are you going to turn this into money? Well, you need to get a job. You need to focus on the things you're good at and the things you're trained for, you know? And all of this is just fine, but no, he threw himself into this. And you know what he was trained for? Nothing. You read about his family. His father was a notary. That meant largely in those days what it does today. His father was a recorder of official documents. It's not a wealthy profession. And you know what they say about his mother? This is so rude. How would you like your mother called a peasant woman? His mother was a peasant woman. What that meant was she did what mothers have done down through the ages, is she cooked and she cleaned and so forth. But the emphasis is in the stories that you read, the encyclopedia entries and stuff, that he didn't have a formal education and he didn't come from wealth and privilege. And his people they weren't all like inventing stuff at the kitchen table, and he was part of that knowledge. It just kind of came up in him. They saw him draw pictures when he was a kid, and his father apprenticed him to a local artist. And whether they asked him how you're going to make a living in this, I don't know, but you kind of get the sense they did. They let the young man follow his passion. And he had a knack for it, they could tell. Because a neighbor brought over a shield one time. And you know, in those days, these weren't decorative items. These were armaments that you kept and you made. You know, it was a wild and lawless time. I have to interrupt here for a moment. At 9:30, we had Sarah Terenzi was here. She's Italian. She's from Italy. And all through my talk, I heard, she was sitting about where Ellie is, Reverend Ellie. She said, all through my talk, I heard, he was from Italy. He's Italian. So I brought up Michelangelo, I brought up Raphael and Botticelli. I hear this little voice of this Italian. So finally I had to acknowledge. I said, all right. Okay, yes. They're all Italian. They're all Italian. Not ranch, not Thousand Island, they're all Italian. And it comes, but it's ubiquitous. It's across the board. Well, they brought this shield over, a neighbor did, to Leonardo's father, who said, well, let the kids draw something on it. And what you wanted was a device on your shield, a design that would be alarming to your enemies, like a, dragon or something. And so the kid drew a device, a fire-breathing monster, like a hydra with snakes coming out of its head, that was so alarming to the father. He said, I can't let the neighbor have this. And they had to go get a second shield and have him do something a little tamer on it. And I don't know how they explained to the neighbor that, because you knew your own shield. Anyway, he had this ability to capture emotion through his art, through his science, through his discovery. That's the thing to realize, is it's bottled emotion. When you see The Last Supper, when you view even his journals of drawings of devices and contraptions and things that made life simpler, there's a feeling that wells up in you. And it's a feeling that this place, creative life, is dedicated to, is devoted to. So he didn't have the training. He didn't have the family dynamic other than indulgence, but not the wealth and not the sending him off to countless lessons of things. He was not part of the nobility, much less the royalty. They weren't heavily moneyed people, but he had this. He had his insatiable curiosity. And it came down to a choice, really, that you make. Like a lot of choices, it's one or the other, It's a twofold thing. And so he writes in one of his journals this. He's out in nature, looking at birds and doing all what he does, making maps. He was a cartographer. He loved to make maps and chart out the landscape and geology, see the strata of things. More on that in a moment. He writes in his journal, having wandered some distance among gloomy rocks, I came to the entrance of a great cavern. Two contrary emotions arose in me, fear and desire. Fear of the threatening dark cavern, desire to see whether there were any marvelous things in it. That's the choice that we make all the time because we're faced with a lot of dark caverns. A dark cavern, metaphorically, is an experience you've not had before. It's the unknown, the threshold of the unknown. You face it, and you have two feelings. Neither is better or worse than the other, but acknowledge that there is fear and wonder. We often say fear and love as the two yin and yang kind of energies. But active love in this sense is wonder or awe. And really you can reconcile them together because the word fear, as we have it out of the Old Testament scriptures, taken out of the Peshitta and in the original Hebrew, is translatable. Fear is translatable as awe. So there's really kind of awe with an edge and awe not with an edge. Awe, A-W-E, like, whoa, right? Because like you watch the sunset sometimes in this vista we have here, and you're like, my God. The song, the old Christian song, oh Lord, my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the worlds thy hands have made, I hear thy voice, I hear the rolling, I see thy something, I hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed. Then sings my soul, O Lord my God, to thee how great thou art, how great thou art. Simple thunder can do that. A nice sunset can do that kind of thing. The waxing crescent moon that we're under, do that kind of thing. But it can also terrify you, as it terrified the ancients sometimes, like solar eclipses and things, because they really didn't know what caused them. And they really didn't know if this meant doom, They weren't stupid people at all, but enough time has to pass between these things and the measurements have to be made. The science has to gear up to understand how things happen, and until they do, you tend to make it personal. When the river rises and floods the plains, you think of it personally. So we stand in this place of contrasted fear and wonder all the time, and the first thing you want to do is acknowledge it. Great, I have a wonderful new opportunity. I'm terrified and delighted at the same time. I was speaking to someone earlier about your shows, as a matter of fact, who alluded to the idea of being both terrified and excited at the prospect of joining you down the road in the cast. Well, that's what that's what we go through. So you recognize it, and then you choose. And then you choose which of these two voices will I follow today. Had he decided there might be a bear, they have bears in Italy, there might be a bear in that cave. Had he decided that and run the other direction, he would not have been wrong. Everybody probably would have agreed with me to run into the village and said, I think there was a bear in that cave. And they said, well, it's good you should turn away. You'd be here. But if you make the decision to go in, you're also not wrong. You might not get a lot of support for it, at least initially. Until you come out and you say, well, there was no bear in there. They say, well, we all knew there wasn't. That happens, you see. We all knew, yeah, it was perfectly fine. But you don't get a lot of support when you do the unconventional thing. His genius was unconventional. There was really no place to put it. The table had to widen because there was just no understanding it. These things he discovered, not being an academic and not having an academic structure, he couldn't just write a paper on it for the Journal of Cool Things and have it be peer-reviewed and this, So it was way out of the box, this unconventional thinking of his, which is why I'm excited to bring him to you, because you are unconventional geniuses too. How I know this about you, and I know a great many of you here personally, because we are kind of a tribe, but I say this, your first visit here, I'll say you're an unconventional genius, and I'll tell you why. You're in this room this morning. You're in this room this morning. You could be in any room this morning, and you're in this house, listening to this, open to these ideas, that makes you unconventional. That means you've looked into the cave. You've looked into the cave before and you've already sort of made your decision about whatever is in there. I'm going in. Are you coming with me? I'm going on in. And what will I find? What I find will change everything. You have the same mind he had. You have the same mind, the God mind. I mean, forget art and invention and stuff. Think about creating a world and people with living things. That's what how Ernest Holmes called it. Creating a world and peopling it with living things, sentient beings. And a wide variety of sentient beings, both in the human family and in all the other species that surround us here. The beauty and the diversity of all of it. Who thought that up? Well, we say God and the Father, or the Father-Mother, or the Mother-Father. We say, Brahma. We say Vishnu. We say Wakantanka, the great grandfather, Allah, peace be upon him, and Wakantanka, the grandfather, which is the God figure, the deity figure of the people who are especially to be observed because they were the ones who lived on this spot that this center occupies long before we were here. The people of the Kushada and the Caddo tribes of East Texas lived here, and they had the idea of the grandfather. Well, in all we say, oh, this is the great creator. What religious science says is you're absolutely right. And peace be upon them and honor to be to all of them. But there's more. There's more. And the more is this. The mind that was first cause is the mind that is next cause. That is next cause in your life and in my life. The very next choice you make has all the power of all of that back of it, if you will agree that it does. And if you don't agree that it does, it still does, but it won't show up like it does because you haven't agreed to it. And it'll show up to it to the degree that you have agreed to it, in the same way that the table kind of widens. Or to put it another way that's less cumbersome, as Terry Cole Whitaker says, who we've had speak here, and she says, if you're not willing to have it all, then you get to decide how much of it all you're willing to have. So if I don't have all the power at hand because I don't know what to do with it, then how much of it do I have at hand and what will I do next? And that really is the point. Because I don't want to intimidate, nor be intimidated by this guy. Because you could read a story like Leonardo's and just flat give up. And say, it's all been done. I mean, how could I possibly surpass? But it was just, they were just drawings till somebody else fleshed them out. They were paintings. But look at how many things have been inspired by those paintings that did not exist at the time. Think of the Last Supper, as remarkable as it is, and there's a whole industry out there now on its interpretation. The Da Vinci Code and Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and all that body of literature that posits all kinds of wild theories and stuff, and they're great fun, and who knows, there may be some truth to some of it, but all of that got started, and somebody picks up a book. I'm thinking of like the Da Vinci Code, and they have that, what is his name, Langdon? Tom Hanks, I think, played it. And he's a symbologist. He's a Harvard symbologist. You know what? There's no such a thing as an academic symbologist. There's no department of symbology at Harvard or anywhere else. But it got people thinking. And I was not a young man when I read that material, and I'd studied esotericism and occultism and this jazz for my whole life. Since childhood, because I was sort of raised with it, you know? And still in all, I read these books and I closed them and I thought, there's an adventure. There's an adventure. Okay, one last story for you. Think of it this way, because it's the time for adventure and questing. When the weather changes here, we all get a little mystical, you know? It's like there's something coming. You feel it in the breeze and all. So there's an adventure coming for you. It's knocking at your door, and you probably receive it very similarly to the way Bilbo Baggins, the Hobbit, received. You familiar with the Hobbit? He's a little guy, furry feet, lived alone, late middle age. They make a big deal of the furry feet. He lived in a comfortable, cut out little, well, cavern, interestingly enough, in a hill with a round door. And he had enough food, and he had enough this, and he smoked a pipe, and he seems just comfortable. He was, I guess, retired from whatever it is hobbits do. So he was, you know, at home all the time. When one night, there's a knock on the door, and he opens it, and there's this gigantic wizard with a whole species of being with the wizard that the Hobbit had never laid eyes on before. All of them armed to the teeth with little shields and little swords and stuff. All of them obviously prepared for a journey, heading out somewhere. And they said to Bilbo, "We need you. We can't do this thing. We have to go to a far country and engage in great trials, and we can't do this thing without you." And he said, "Me? But I'm just," and he started reciting what was for him probably a mantra of his own limitations. I'm this, and I'm that, and I'm not this, and I'm not that, and so we need you. And he declined the invitation, as you recall. And then they kind of tore up his house. They partied all night and tore up his house and said, "We're leaving the next morning," and asked him to come along, you know, asked him to reconsider. And finally something in him moved. The needle moved, you know, and he went. And you know from the story that not only was he the hero, not only did he help them accomplish this thing about which it had this whole long lore to it he had no idea about. He got caught up on the story along the way. Not only was he the hero of that story, but he found something in the dark, in another cavern. He found something that became the thing that changed everything in the whole of creation in later stories. Well, J.R.R. Tolkien and his colleagues and his rivals, like Michelangelo was Da Vinci's rival, his friendly rivals like C.S. Lewis, the Christian apologist, and so on, they were all on the same wavelength in talking about a journey, a quest. And we'll go through this more in a month to come, but the first step of the quest is realize that something knocks at the door and you're like, not me. Not unto me. Not unto me. You remember what Ernest Holmes says in the textbook? I think it's in the preface where he says, "Not alone unto the great has come the unseen guest. Not alone unto the great and wise and educated and privileged and et cetera, has come the unseen guest, but unto you. Unto the peasant woman, unto each of us, there has come this idea, we need you. We need you to do this thing. And there is something calling you, and it is quite simply the will of God, which is not at all what most of us have thought the will of God was, which was to change religions and be in the right one that gets on the bus to heaven. There's one religion, Bernard Shaw said, and 100 versions of it. There's one religion. The religion is this one life. And that is the thing that's coming to you, that will of God. It's saying, be you. Go be you. There's no one, Dr. Seuss said, there's no one youer than you. Go be you, right? Yeah. Go be you and watch the birds and watch creation. For the thing that you expressly will find your heart singing when you do it. Let's know together now, there is this one life, this one power, this one presence, this one thing, this one great mind, this one great heart, having an experience of itself in the world at this time by means of me. That means I share in all of its attributes, all of its capacities. I don't use them all up. I may not even use them all simultaneously, but they're there, and I do use them. And they swing into action every time I think. Every time I choose. It could be one way or the other. I could give in to fear. Or I could give in to wonder. And either way, I'm not wrong. For a dream deferred is still a dream. and it repeatedly knocks at the door of consciousness until it is admitted. I may have missed opportunities along the way, but I have not missed opportunity. For that have I come. For that has each of us come. For such a time as this has each one of us come to be the next step in the evolution of humankind, the healing of the planet, the healing of the cosmos for that matter, of any sense, any residual sense of separation from our source. In the intervening space, there will be inventions, discoveries, songs to sing, poems to write. There might be a painting that you go home this afternoon and decide to get out the watercolors and set up the easel and start on. There might be a painting that will not only introduce to you your incredible artistic genius and that of the one mind that made you. It might be a painting that hangs on a wall someplace and a child sees it and it changes everything for them. Just as so many of us have seen or heard someone do something, perform something, and have said quietly, probably privately to ourselves, if I could do anything at all, it would be that. Part of that great chain of knowledge unfolding and feeling encircling is occurring through each one of us right now today. And because we've heard this, because now this has entered into our consciousness, there's no shaking it off. It goes on with us. It is a pleasant disturbance in the force to know this one life by means of you is continuing its creative capacity unabated for this knowing and its manifestation in form everywhere we turn. I am so deeply grateful. I release this word now into the infinite, calling it done, and so it is.
So it is.